Welcome to The Catch Up, a podcast from the Daily Catch where we take you inside the news. My name is Walter Mullen, and I'm the publisher of the Daily Catch.
And I'm Emily Sachar, the editor of the Daily Catch.
In this podcast, we discuss stories that have appeared in the Daily Catch. We give you insights into how we put the stories together, offer additional observations, and discuss where the stories may be heading as we move forward. And just a quick reminder to listeners, if you like our broadcast, please be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite platform so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. Emily, are you ready to catch up?
Let's do it, Walter.
Okay, so we're going to start by talking about two different projects in Red Hook to manage our sewer system. And I have to say at the outset that I have to believe a lot of our readers log on and look at our page and say, oh dear, another story about sewers. Sewer stories can be very dull and very complicated, but they're also very important. So let's try and step through very carefully the details of these stories. There's a lot of numbers and a lot of acronyms, and I think the more we can unpack it in a simple way for listeners, the better.
We will do it. We will certainly make every best effort.
So why don't we start with the project where they're trying to lay a sewer system on south of the village on Route 9. Let's start there.
Okay. So as you said, there are two projects under discussion right now. Well, probably more actually, but two that are immediately in the news. One in the village and one in the town. They are linked because the project in the town that you ask about, and which we'll talk about first, needs to connect to the wastewater treatment plant in the village. So as you said, we'll step through it slowly. So coming south out of the village of Red Hook, we drive along, we walk along Route 9, which is known as South Broadway. After you leave the village, the part of that district, the part of that area is called the Traditional Neighborhood Development Area, or the TND. And it has things along it like the Holy Cow Plaza. Mighty Donuts is along there now. There are some, the movie theater, the Lyceum movie theater is there. I think Tribell's Garage is in that district. So there are a number of businesses. There also are some farming properties, and there are residences. Altogether, there are 51 properties that are considered to be in that TND district that will be affected by the sewer.
And let's just explain what a traditional neighborhood district is intended to do.
Yeah, so what it's intended to do is a little bit different from what it actually seems to be doing. But when it was originally conceived, the idea was you would have businesses close to the street frontage, creating a traditional neighborhood, a traditional kind of walking experience and shopping experience. Now, for a variety of complex reasons that we won't go into today, that has not exactly borne fruit. But one of the reasons that it hasn't borne the fruit that many think it should or could is that there is no functioning sewer. So, for example, we can't have a restaurant along there that has very high needs for processing human or food waste. That's an example. So the goal of the sewer is to make that more possible. There's a second very important part of the project, however, and that is that if you don't have a sewer, what you have are all these properties with individual septic systems behind them. And over time, as you may know, because you probably have a septic, I have a septic at my home, these septic systems go bad, they have to be pumped, they have to be relayed, they fail. So one of the goals of this septic system, of this sewer, is to consolidate all of those issues into one problem-solving mechanism, and that is to bring a modern sewer to that area. Now, I am told that this sewer will generate about 29,000 gallons of waste per day. And this is why it's very important to understand its connection to the wastewater treatment plant in the village. I'll stop there and we can take your questions.
I think I'm good so far, but let's just talk a little bit about the 51 parcels that you mentioned. because those 51 parcels are then divided into 193 equivalent dwelling units. And that's where I start to get a little confused.
So think of it this way. A parcel can be any size, right? So in this TND zone, we have the Hannaford supermarket. In this zone, we have quarter-acre homes on a quarter-acre of property. So for purposes of charging people to use the sewer, which is the way this system will be ultimately funded, at least in part, we can't charge Hannaford the same thing that we charge the little homeowner. So what the engineers have done is assigned to each property a certain number of what are called EDUs, or you know what it stood for, I can't even remember.
Equivalent
dwelling units. And it apportions them based on the amount of wastewater that they generate.
So let's just stop there. If there's a single family home in this area, is that equivalent to one equivalent dwelling unit?
It's roughly equivalent, but I don't want to go that specifically into it because there are some confounding factors. But in general, a home is roughly equivalent to one unit, but not always.
Yeah. And so this is important because this is how they apportion the payment process.
Right. So let's talk a minute about the cost. So for this project, the cost is estimated to be about $6.6 million. And we wrote about this week because the town is beginning to apply for grants. And they applied for a grant of, I think, about $1 million. So let's assume that they are successful getting that grant. Okay, that brings the price down a bit. They also have some money left over from COVID relief funds that are sitting in a coffer. That will further reduce the cost. But at some point, they will be done getting grants, they will be done using their COVID relief money, and they have to find out and decide how to spend or how to apportion the cost for the balance. So what they are planning to do, according to Supervisor Robert McKeon, is to float a bond. And when you float a bond at, let's say, a 4% interest rate, people have to pay that bond back. So how do you apportion that bond? Red Hook has 11,200 citizens. Do all of them pay for this sewer on South Broadway? No. It is the people who live and work and own property in those 51 parcels and those 193 EDUs who will be responsible for it. So in order to determine the amount that each of them will owe and what will apply on their tax bill every year, they have to do this equivalent dwelling unit exercise. And that helps apportion the cost, so to speak.
So is this grant for 1.25 million, is that a done deal? Or
No, it's an application for a grant, right?
Okay.
So if it doesn't come in, if it does come in, things move ahead, as I just said. If it doesn't come in, the town of Red Hook will have to go through a reckoning exercise and decide, well, are they going to go out to the community with this larger bond that might cost more money? Because 6.6 million is more than 5 million, let's say. So they would decide that. We're not there yet, but they are hoping to have an information back on whether the grant was successful by the end of 2025.
So before we move to the other part of the story, let's just look into our crystal ball. Assume the grant comes through, assume the bond works as it should, assume the work takes place. When will this sewer be finished, do we expect?
It sounds like it won't be any sooner than 2027, and it might be later than that. We really don't have that crystal ball. After the money comes through, assuming it does, there are design exercises that must be completed. There are cost exercises that must be completed. Who knows whether this will be affected by Trump tariffs? The cost of some of the items in the bundle to build it may change in price. So we're a long way away from having this functioning sewer. And Walter, another thing we should talk about is the shared nature, this public-private sharing agreement that will have to take place. And that's contingent on what's going on with the second project we're going to talk about. Because right now, the town does not have a wastewater treatment plant. It has to connect to the one in the village. So that's where we can go next. And I have one other thing I want to mention. The town is interested in developing a property south of Hannaford into a hotel. Those details we have not reported yet. We're waiting to get more information about what that project might look like. But that project would also be part of this sewer ambition. And that may also affect how big the sewer is, how long it goes, and so forth and so on.
So, Emily, I have two more questions on this, and I'm looking at this through the eyes of a homeowner. Imagine I'm a homeowner in Red Hook and this new sewer comes down my street. Am I required to link up with that new sewer, or can I choose to remain on my septic?
No, you cannot choose to remain on septic. Once this project goes, you are going to be attached to it.
Okay, now my follow-up question. I'm now required to join this sewer system as a homeowner. What additional costs am I going to be incurring per year, for example, if I do that?
Right. So, as I was mentioning, there would be a bond that would be floated, and that bond would be paid back by the homeowners of the sewer district. So, a sewer district will be created, and the costs will be apportioned specifically to the people in that district. Right now, using today's dollars and today's estimates, which could change, they could go way up. But right now, one EDU in the town of Red Hook will be equivalent to a use fee of $2,602. We have some parcels that are going to pay an additional $41,000 a year. We have some that are going to pay $62,000 a year. Holy Cow Plaza, owned by Todd Baywright, would pay an additional $44,000 a year. And then the small individual properties that are just a single family home, roughly $2,000, $2,600 in that range.
So once that bond is repaid, I then pay nothing?
That's correct. After the bond is repaid, typically this would be funded over a 30-year period, however, so many of us will not live to see the end of it. But then there will be additional fees. So the cost of the construction portion of that use fee would cease to exist, but there will continue to be expenses of maintaining and operating the sewer. And we can't project into our opaque crystal ball what that will look like.
Okay, now we're going to transition it back into the village and talk about the sewer and water treatment plant activity going on there.
Yes. Okay. So we understand what's going on South Broadway, or at least what is intended. The village is the heartbeat of this whole nexus of sewers. First of all, the village wants to increase the number of properties that are on sewer to start with. So phase one of the village project put 127 properties onto a sewer, and the wastewater treatment plant that manages that sewer, which is behind the Red Hook Common housing project and the one that has been so in the news because it has been failing, was set to treat 75,000 gallons. Okay, it is at capacity. It cannot take any more waste. The village, though, wants the entire village to be on a sewer. So phase two is to add 170 properties. That's part one of phase two. In order to manage and treat the waste from all of those properties, we need to increase the size of the treatment plant capacity. Okay, so I said 75,000, currently 75,000 gallons. They are going to build a new 250,000 gallon per day treatment unit. So that will increase the total service capacity to 325,000 gallons. This will accommodate all of the additional 170 parcels. It will also accommodate the plan to go south on Broadway that the town is seeking. So the village treatment plant will be the locus to treat the waste from all of the activities in the village and eventually perhaps the town as well. Now, we're not done there because that will not yet bring every single parcel in the village onto sewer, onto central sewer. So the village says it may have a third phase, but we're not there yet. Our crystal ball is very black very opaque. We don't know yet what's happening with that. So let's just stick with phase 2, which is plenty complicated.
And phase 2 involves a $10 million grant to get this work underway.
Yes, exactly. And the same thing that I just described to you about the EDUs, something comparable will have to happen in the village if this grant comes through and if the village moves ahead with this $19.5 million project. We'll have a shortage of $9.5 million. It's a lot of money, has to be spread out across the users of the district. And the users of the district are not the people in the first phase. They are going to be, as I understand it, the properties in the new phase. Okay, now there's one other really important point about this project. One of the projects to be included in this phase is the Rupco Affordable Housing Complex on Cookingham East. They need sewer there. There is no sewer there now because there's nothing there but a farm or property that was part of a farm. So the plan there is to build a building with 20 affordable housing apartments and 20 single-family homes. All of them would be on the central sewer. So a big question mark is, if this grant is not successful, and if central sewer is not taken up for some reason up to Cookingham, what happens? What other alternatives exist so that that project can move forward? And I don't have an answer for you. Again, my crystal ball is pretty opaque. It's a little bit more visible on the central sewer idea in the village, but there's still a lot of unanswered questions there.
May I ask one question, which I think listeners might find interesting? Imagine I have a home in the village, and right now I'm on septic. And then, lo and behold, the sewer comes down my street. How do I connect to that sewer? What happens? Do you know?
Yes. This has happened already for the 127 properties in phase 1. A company will be hired. A bid will be offered. There will be a request for proposals. A contractor will be settled upon. And that contractor will go behind each and every house and extricate the old septic and lay the new sewer line. And anyone who's interested can go back and look through our clips where we had articles about the company that did this. We had many beautiful photographs. I thought they were beautiful, of this project being laid. And then eventually all the little pipes get connected to one another, and the sewer line that runs under the ground gets attached to the wastewater treatment plant into which it empties. Now, there's one other thing you haven't asked about, but I'm sure that is on the minds of people who live in the village. And that is, but wait, our wastewater treatment plant has been in trouble. So how can we be assured that our wastewater treatment plant can handle this new burden? Well, there are people, environmentalists, who are part of the Sauk Hill Tributary Coalition, who don't believe that the treatment plant can handle this additional burden. The village argues that it can, and it's going to build a new treatment plant or treatment unit as part of the plant to handle this additional waste. But I think that debate will undoubtedly continue. The Sauk Hill Tributary Coalition would like the county to manage this treatment plant. The village is moving ahead, saying it will continue to manage the treatment plant. We are not done with this discussion. We, in some ways, are just beginning this discussion.
So, as I said at the top of the podcast, this could be one of the most uninteresting topics to write and talk about, yet it's hugely important.
I find it fascinating. I don't find it. I think it's complicated when you're coming to it as you are and as I was 4 months ago or 5 months ago. But once one gets into it and learns about the 51 properties and the 193 EDUs and really breaks down how it's going to work and how it's going to function, this is critical to people's lives. This is your human waste. I mean, we all know what it's like to have a clogged up toilet. Think about the clogged up toilet problem and think, do you want to have that in your life? No, you don't. Do you want to be worried that your septic is going to fail? No, you don't. This is something that is not necessarily a beautiful thing to talk about. It's not a beautiful new oak tree. It's not a bunch of beautiful new flowers that you're planting, but it's probably the most important thing we as homeowners, those of us who are homeowners, and those of us who live in rented properties have to be concerned about. Our plumbing This is the village's plumbing. This is the town's plumbing. It's akin to our personal plumbing and our plumbing in our homes.
And I think everyone would agree they want the town and the village to flourish and grow, and they'd love to have new restaurants and new preschools and daycare and what have you, but you need this infrastructure in place in order for that to happen.
That's absolutely right. I recently, and I think you were part of these conversations, Walter, we talked to the former supervisor of Hyde Park. And Hyde Park has been stymied for decades because it doesn't have a central sewer. So this is very, very important for a community to grow, as you say. And this affordable housing project, which is dear and near to the hearts of so many in our community, everybody wants new affordable housing to be built. It depends on this sewer project going through.
So they can't break ground on the affordable housing until this sewer project is locked and loaded?
I don't want to say that because there are always ideas and concepts and problem-solving mechanisms, and maybe they would decide if this doesn't look like it will go through to build their own sewer system, to build their own septic system. That's certainly possible. I think that the affordable housing is so desired in this community that where there's a will, there will be a way. But certainly the intent has been to hook it to a central sewer.
One thing that I feel these stories tell us is the complexity of local town government. And listeners might be thinking, what does the supervisor do all day and what does the mayor do all day? But there's a huge complexity to these grants and this process, and they really have to roll up their sleeves and get into it.
Yes, I think that is something I didn't realize before I started the Daily Catch, that especially in small rural government, the amount of time that is spent looking for, sourcing, applying for, and following up on grants is just unbelievable. I thought that was unique to the Daily Catch, Walter, because we do that to raise money too.
Sure.
And it's tedious and it's time consuming. And after you get the grant, you're so happy you got the grant. Then you have to follow up and tell the grantor how you use the money and make sure that you're doing everything correctly and dotting the I's and crossing the T's. It's very, very time consuming and tedious. And I have a lot of respect now for our local elected leaders, even if I don't agree, or even if I understand from our readers that they don't agree. I do understand the burden of trying to keep the infrastructure of a town and a village in place. I'll tell you another thing, unrelated. I was biking. I was getting ready to cover the county fair in a few weeks, and I always bike because of the traffic along Route 9 down by the fairgrounds. I like to bike down Route 9G and then over to Route 9. I was just appalled what has happened in the wintertime to the surface of Route 9G. It's not going to be safe to bike down there. So that's another thing. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, our village and town leaders don't manage Route 9G. It's a state road. But that's what our state leaders are supposed to be tackling. Now, are they doing it? I'm going to argue right now, I'm pretty disappointed with our transportation management of Route 9G. But the point is, these are things we often take for granted as citizens.
Absolutely. So I hope this discussion helped to simplify, perhaps, this story, and the Daily Catch will continue to report on it and to follow on it. So let's transition to a quick update on our next story, and this is the story about Gerson Tercios, the Honduran immigrant who was picked up by ICE in Rhinebeck. What is the most recent update that we have here?
Yeah, so it's a pretty quick update, and it's not much of one, but it is a shift. Gerson Tercios' lawyers filed an application to reopen his immigration case in immigration court. So our readers may recognize or remember from last week's coverage that Gerson's case was heard in a federal court on the Wednesday after his arrest. And the goal, I am told by lawyers, of that action was to try to extend the calendar out so that he wouldn't have to be immediately deported. So they were able to get that 1 week extension. And during that time frame, during that week, they were able to apply to reopen the case. Now you might ask, what's that case about? So what we have learned is that Gerson Tercios, after he emigrated from Honduras into the United States illegally and crossed the border in Hidalgo, Texas, he was assigned to live with his brother in Rhinebeck, immigration status of whom I do not know. And in that time frame after that happened, he began to be addressed by letter by the immigration authorities. This was incidentally during the Biden administration. And immigration hearings were set up, we are told, by the court documents of the judge who gave an additional extension, that he was given to come in August of 2023 and then again in November of 2023. And for whatever reason, he did not appear in immigration court. So he was ordered to be deported, but he was ordered to be deported in absentia, meaning he was absent. So he continued to live his life before his arrest on July 18th.
The order for him to be deported happened during the Biden administration.
That's correct. So when ICE agents arrived at the home in which he was living on that Friday, 2.5 weeks ago, they were apparently looking for somebody else, but they used a facial recognition system to look into Kherson's face, and they decided that he tracked with somebody who had been previously marked for deportation, and they arrested him. So now what happens is once the papers have been filed to reopen the case, he cannot be deported. So he's safe for another short period of time, safe by which I mean he's allowed to stay in the jail in the country, in the United States, until a decision is made about whether his case will be reopened.
Do we know when that decision to reopen the case or not reopen the case might be made?
We do not. I was going to mention that there's a branch now, right? There's the case gets reopened. That could go various ways. The case doesn't get reopened. If it doesn't get reopened, my suspicion is he is then deported. If it is reopened, they could decide to allow him to stay. They could decide to allow him not to stay. And our crystal ball is still opaque. We're not going to predict, but that's what we will be waiting for and watching very closely in the coming days.
And just to go back to clarify or confirm, he missed 2 of his immigration hearings in 2023.
That's correct.
And we do not know why, but that's what led to his order to be deported originally.
That's correct.
Okay.
We do know from reporting that we did very early on after the arrest that he had informed one of his teachers that he had received the notice. So at least it's secondhand reporting, but that's what the teacher has told us, a very reliable substitute teacher in Rhinebeck with whom Kherson was working on a pretty regular basis on his English.
Okay, why don't we wrap up today's podcast with Ask Emily and Walter. And this week, you're going to ask me a question, Emily.
It's my turn, Walter. So we just learned that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, that's a federal operation, will be shutting down next year. And I found it a little nerve-wracking to read about that. I just wondered, Walter, as our publisher, could you tell us what this means for local news?
Great question. Well, specifically, the Daily Catch does not receive any funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. We get our funding from readers and from businesses and from grants. So it's not going to impact the Daily Catch. We're going to continue to rely on our readers and our supporters. But I think what this will mean is if you're an engaged citizen in your community and you want to have a source of local news, you're going to have to step up and fund it yourself. Communities are going to have to step up and support local news sources in their area if they want to have a local news source. And truly, that's what's happened with the Daily Catch these past 4 years. We've seen our readers and we've seen our local charities and local businesses really support the paper. And I think the model for the Daily Catch, which has been very successful, will have to spread to other communities.
That's great. So just to bring it home a little bit to the Daily Catch, how is the Daily Catch doing, Walter, on fundraising?
We're doing very well on fundraising. We typically do our big fundraising push at the end of the year. So November, December, everyone can expect to get lots of messages from us asking for their support. Then periodically during the year, we also reach out to major donors, and we're constantly reaching out to businesses and to foundations for support. But we like to focus our big fundraising effort in November and December. That being said, if you're listening and you want to make a donation to us, you can always make a donation. Just go to thedailykatch.org and you'll see the donate button.
That's great. That was very interesting, Walter. Thank you.
Great. So you can email questions to me at walter@thedailykatch, and we will answer them on future podcasts. This concludes this episode of The Catch Up. We hope you enjoyed listening. If you like our broadcast, please be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite platform so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. Thank you to Matty Rosenberg and Jen Hammoud at Radio Free Rhinecilff for their help producing today's episode. And thank you to Esther Martell for her help with editing. Emily, it was a pleasure catching up. Let's get started on the new week.
Can't wait.